For my son's wedding, I gave him my heart, my blessing, and a check that represented the last of my husband's life insurance. A year later, I discovered that in return, he had given me a granddaughter he was hiding from the world like a shameful secret. I found her not in a hospital nursery wrapped in a pink blanket, but in a faded photograph tucked away like a piece of forgotten evidence. And when I finally held her in my arms, I knew I wasn't just fighting for a place in her life. I was fighting for her soul. They thought a grandmother's love was a gentle, quiet thing. They were about to learn it could also be a righteous, roaring fire. You will not believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what you would have done in my place. The silence in my house had become a presence of its own. After my husband, Robert, passed, the quiet was a heavy blanket of grief. But over the last year, since my son Daniel's wedding, it had changed. It had become a hollow, echoing thing, a silence filled with unanswered questions and calls that were never returned with the same warmth they were made with. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, and stared at the framed photo on the mantel. Daniel, my Daniel, grinning in his graduation cap and gown, his arm around me. We were a team then, a unit of two against the world after his father was gone. I had poured every ounce of my being into that boy, ensuring he had every opportunity, every advantage my teacher's salary could afford. And it had worked. He was a brilliant lawyer, a success, everything a mother could dream of. Then came Chloe. She was perfect, on paper. She came from old money, the kind that doesn't need to be flashy because its existence is an established fact. Her family owned half the commercial real estate downtown. She was beautiful, poised, and educated at all the right schools. When Daniel brought her home to meet me, she glided into my comfortable, slightly cluttered house like a swan entering a duck pond. She was polite, of course. She complimented my garden, my baking, the very things that now seemed to define my small, middle-class world in her eyes. But there was a distance, a cool assessment in her gaze as she took in my worn floral armchair and my collection of mismatched teacups. I was a quaint relic from her husband's past, a sentimental story to be told, but not a central character in their gleaming future. I told myself I was being sensitive. This was the natural order of things. A son cleaves to his wife. I smiled through the wedding preparations, writing a check for $50,000, the last of Robert's legacy, without a second thought. For a down payment on a real home, darling, I told them, ignoring the subtle sting when Chloe referred to their future minimalist mansion as a proper family home, as if the one Daniel had grown up in was somehow improper. After the wedding, the distance became a chasm. My calls to Daniel were answered with hurried, distracted replies. Sorry, Mom, Chloe and I have a gala. Can't talk, we're in Aspen with her parents. My invitations for Sunday dinner were met with polite but firm refusals. Chloe S. on a very strict diet, Mom. Your pot roast, as delicious as it is, just doesn't fit her macros. My home, once his sanctuary, was now a dietary inconvenience. I tried to understand. I truly did. They were building a life, a brand. Their world was one of charity boards and regattas, of silent auctions and summering in the Hamptons. My world was one of book clubs and potting soil. I was an anchor to a past they were sailing away from at high speed. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant companion in the quiet house. It was on a rainy Tuesday, a day heavy with melancholy, that I decided to finally tackle the attic. It was a task I'd been putting off, a Pandora's box of memories. Up in the cool, dusty air, surrounded by the ghosts of a life well lived, I found a box labeled Daniel College. I sat on the floor and opened it, a sad smile on my face as I pulled out his old debate trophies and worn-out sweatshirts. Tucked between two heavy textbooks was a photo album. Not a formal one, but a cheap, plastic-sleeved book filled with candid shots of dorm parties and spring break trips. And then I saw it. It wasn't in a sleeve. It was just there, a loose 4x6 photograph that must have been slipped inside recently. The color was sharp, the finish glossy. It was a recent picture, my breath caught in my throat. It was Daniel. He was standing in what looked like a park, and in his arms he held a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. She had a riot of dark, curly hair, but her eyes were a startling, brilliant blue. They were Daniel's eyes, my eyes. She was clinging to him, her small face a perfect blend of features I knew as well as my own. On the back of the photo, in a R-eyed, almost frantic script were 2 words, Lily, forgive me. The attic suddenly felt cold, suffocating. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Who was this child? Why was Daniel holding her with such a look of pained affection on his face? Why did he need to be forgiven? I stumbled down the stairs, the photograph clutched in my hand, my mind racing. A colleague's child, a distant cousin. But the eyes, you couldn't fake those eyes. They were the Ross family eyes, a genetic stamp passed down through generations. I called him immediately. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice impatient. "Mom, I'm in a meeting. Is it important?" "I found a photograph, Daniel," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "In your old college album, of you with a little girl." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, a dead weight of guilt. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight, artificial. "Oh, that's Mark's daughter from the office. We were at a company picnic." He was lying, I knew it instantly. Daniel had a slight stammer, a way of rushing his words when he was being dishonest. He had done it since he was a boy, trying to explain a broken vase or a missed curfew. He was doing it now. "Her name is Lily," I said quietly, reading the back of the photo. "Mark's daughter is named Jessica. I met her at your Christmas party." Another silence, longer this time. "Look, Mom, I have to go," he said, his voice strained. "It's nothing, just an old photo." "I'll call you later." He hung up before I could say another word. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. The lie was confirmation, a blaring alarm in the quiet of my heart. My son, my only child, had a secret so profound he had to lie to his own mother about it. My mind, once foggy with grief and loneliness, was now sharp, focused. I thought back to his life before Chloe, to law school. There was a girl then, Maya, a sweet, intelligent girl from a working-class family, a scholarship student with a brilliant mind and a kind heart. I had adored her. Daniel had been deeply in love with her. Then, suddenly, it was over. He met Chloe at a summer internship between semesters, and Maya was just gone. He'd been vague about the breakup, saying they just wanted different things. Now, I wondered what those different things were. My hands shook as I typed her name, Maya Castillo, into a social media search bar. Her profile was private, but the small, circular profile picture was not of her. It was a school portrait of a little girl with a mass of dark curls and startlingly familiar blue eyes. Her name, listed right below, was Lily Castillo, and her age was listed as 4 years old. Daniel and Maya had broken up 5 years ago. The math was a brutal, simple equation that added up to a truth so devastating it stole the air from my lungs. My son had a daughter, and he had abandoned her for a life of wealth and status with a woman who would never have accepted a child from a past he was so desperate to erase. I sank into my chair, the photograph on the table in front of me. This wasn't just a secret. It was a betrayal of the highest order, not just to me, but to an innocent child. And in that moment, I knew I had to find her. I had to know the truth. My quiet, lonely life was over. A war for the soul of my family had just begun. The photograph lay on my kitchen table like a verdict. For hours, I sat there, the cooling tea forgotten, the world outside my window fading to an indistinct blur. The initial shock, the hot, searing pain of betrayal, began to cool and harden into something else, a cold, diamond-hard resolve. The hollow echo in my house was gone, replaced by the thrumming of a singular, undeniable purpose. The question was no longer if Lily was my granddaughter, but what I was going to do about it. My son had made his choice. He had chosen the sterile perfection of Chloe's world over the messy, beautiful reality of his own child. He had chosen money over fatherhood. He had chosen a lie. Well, I was choosing the truth. My past life as a schoolteacher had taught me patience and the importance of a well-thought-out plan. I couldn't just storm the gates. Showing up on Maya's doorstep, a ghost from her past, would be an act of aggression, not of love. It would frighten her, and worse, it would frighten the child. I needed to be certain to see with my own eyes before I took a single step that could not be undone. My online search had given me an address for Maya Castillo in Northwood, a small industrial town about an hour's drive away. It was a world away from the manicured lawns and gated communities where Daniel and Chloe now lived. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the contrast was the entire point of this cruel charade. The next morning, I dressed in simple, unassuming clothes, a pair of comfortable slacks and a plain blue blouse. I wanted to blend in, to be invisible. As I drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, my mind was a raging torrent of memories and questions. I saw Daniel as a little boy, his face alight with wonder as we read bedtime stories. I saw him as a teenager, agonizing over a history paper at this very kitchen table. I saw the fierce pride and love in his eyes when he spoke of Maya during his law school days. "She's brilliant, Mom," he had said, his voice full of a reverence I had never heard him use for Chloe. "She's not just smart, she's good. She wants to be a public defender, to help people who have no one else." Where was that boy now? Had he been completely erased by the man who drove a sports car I'd helped pay for and vacationed in places where people like Maya would only be allowed in as staff? The anger I felt was a physical thing, a hot coil in my stomach. It wasn't just anger at the betrayal to me, but at the betrayal of his own values, the ones his father and I had worked so hard to instill in him. Robert had been a man of quiet integrity. He believed that what you did when no one was watching was the true measure of your character. By that measure, my son had become a spiritual pauper. As I drove, the landscape changed. The sprawling suburbs with their identical beige houses gave way to older, more worn-down towns. The chain restaurants were replaced by local diners and family-owned businesses. Northwood was clean but weary, a town that worked hard for a living. It was a town of real people, a world away from the curated illusion my son now inhabited. I found Maya's address easily. It was a modest, 3-story brick apartment building with neat, if small, patches of grass out front. It was the kind of place a young, single mother working a demanding job could afford. A wave of shame washed over me. While I was writing checks for Chloe's designer handbags and Mark's country club fees, my own granddaughter was living here without the financial support, and far more importantly, the love and acknowledgement of her father. Instead of going to the door, I drove a block away to a small public park. It was a simple, lovely space with a playground, a few picnic tables, and large, shady oak trees. It was the kind of place I used to take Daniel when he was little. I parked the car, my heart a frantic, painful drum against my ribs, and found a park bench that gave me a clear view of the playground. And then I waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I watched other mothers with their children, a lump forming in my throat. I saw a father push his daughter on the swings, her gleeful shrieks echoing in the warm afternoon air. Every happy family I saw was a fresh stab of pain, a reminder of what my son had thrown away, of what had been stolen from me. I was just about to give up, to convince myself this was all a terrible, foolish mistake, when I saw them. A woman with dark, flowing hair walked into the park, holding the hand of a little girl who was chattering animatedly, pointing at the slide. It was Maya. She was a little older, of course, with a faint weariness in her posture that hadn't been there in college, but her smile was the same, warm, genuine, and focused entirely on the child beside her. And the child, oh, the child. My breath caught in a sob I had to physically stifle. She had a wild halo of dark, curly hair, but as she turned her face up to her mother, the sunlight caught her eyes. They were a brilliant, piercing blue. They were Daniel's eyes. They were my father's eyes. It was like looking at a ghost, a promise, and a heartbreak all at once. I sat frozen on that bench, a silent, invisible observer, and watched my granddaughter play. Her name was Lily, and she was a whirlwind of joyous energy. She climbed the slide and flew down with a squeal of delight. She spun on the merry-go-round until she was dizzy, her laughter the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I saw the way Maya looked at her, with an ocean of fierce, protective love in her gaze. This child was not unloved. She was adored. She was the center of her mother's universe. And I saw the flashes of my son in her, the determined set of her jaw as she tried to master the monkey bars, the way her face lit up with an impish grin just before she did something mischievous, the small, thoughtful frown she got when she stopped to examine a ladybug on a leaf. He was there in her every movement, a living, breathing echo of the boy I had raised. This was not a suspicion anymore. This was a certainty. This beautiful, vibrant, perfect little girl was my blood, my granddaughter. And a fresh wave of fury, so powerful it made me dizzy, washed over me. How could he? How could Daniel, my son, deny this incredible child? How could he look at this miracle and feel anything other than overwhelming love and pride? What had Chloe and her family done to him that he would amputate a part of his own soul to fit into their world? As I watched Maya lift Lily into her arms, kissing her Sue. NDLY on the cheek, my mission, which had once been simply to find the truth, crystallized into something far more profound. This was no longer about my hurt feelings or Daniel's betrayal. It was about her. It was about that little girl with my family's eyes, who deserved to know that she had a grandmother who would love her fiercely, who deserved to know that her father's family was not a void of silence and shame. Maya and Lily started walking towards the park exit, their path taking them right past my bench. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was now or never. I could stay hidden in the shadows, a coward, and drive back to my empty house with the confirmation of my heartbreak. Or I could stand up. I could walk into the light and face the truth, and in doing so, perhaps begin to heal the wound my son had carved into all of our lives. I stood up, my legs trembling, and took a step forward. The war for the truth was over. The fight for my granddaughter had just begun. For a long moment, I could only stand there, frozen, as Maya and my granddaughter walked away from me, a small, self-contained universe of two. Every instinct screamed at me to run to them, to gather this child I didn't know into my arms. But every rational thought warned me to be cautious, to be gentle. This was not a door to be kicked down, but one that had to be unlocked with trust. I took a breath that felt ragged and thin in the cool afternoon air, and I found my voice. Maya. Name was a quiet question, barely disturbing the air, but she heard it. She stopped, her back stiffening before slowly turning around. Her eyes, the warm, intelligent brown eyes I remembered so well, widened first in confusion, and then in a dawning, horrified recognition. Her arm tightened around Lily, pulling the child protectively against her leg. Lily, sensing her mother's tension, peered out at me with a child's open curiosity, her bright blue eyes a startling echo of my own family's history. In that one, unguarded look from my granddaughter, I saw my entire past and a future I was terrified of losing. Mrs. Ross, Maya breathed, her voice a mixture of shock and dread. She looked past me, scanning the park as if expecting Daniel to emerge from behind a tree, a conjurer revealing his cruelest trick. What are you doing here?" Her question was not an accusation, but a genuine, panicked inquiry. In her world, I was not supposed to exist. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, my hands open at my sides to show I was not a threat. "I'm sorry to startle you, Maya. I know this is the last thing you expected," I said, my voice softer than I intended. I was hoping we could talk, just for a few minutes, please." My gaze flickered to Lily, who was now hiding shyly behind her mother's legs. "She is beautiful," I said, the words catching in my throat. Maya's resolve seemed to crumble and then immediately rebuild itself into a wall of maternal protection. "This isn't a good time," she said, her voice firm. "We were just leaving." She was afraid. Not of me, I realized, but of the disruption I represented. I was a complication that threatened the fragile peace she had built for her daughter. "Please," I said again, and this time my own desperation bled through. "I won't cause a scene. There's a small coffee shop just around the corner. Let me buy you both a hot chocolate. 10 minutes, that's all I ask." I looked directly into her eyes, trying to convey a message that went beyond words. I am not your enemy. We are on the same side of a heartbreak you don't yet know we share. Perhaps she saw the sincerity in my face, or perhaps she was simply too stunned to refuse. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her daughter, and then she gave a slow, reluctant nod. The walk to the coffee shop was the longest 300 feet of my life, a tense, silent procession. Once inside, we settled at a small table in the corner. I ordered them 2 hot chocolates with extra whipped cream and a simple black coffee for myself, my hands trembling as I paid. Lily, sensing a truce, was now happily occupied with her drink, her earlier shyness forgotten. I waited until she was engrossed in spooning the whipped cream into her mouth before I spoke. I couldn't lead with the truth. I had to lead with the lie. My son's lie. I reached into my purse and pulled out the photograph, laying it gently on the table between us. "I found this, Maya," I said quietly, "tucked away in one of Daniel's old college albums. When I asked him who this beautiful little girl was, he lied to me." Maya's face went pale. She stared at the photograph as if it were a snake. She didn't have to ask what the lie was. She had clearly been living with its consequences for years. "He told me it was the daughter of a colleague from his office," I continued, my voice steady. "I knew he wasn't telling the truth, so I did some searching, and I found you, and I saw her picture." I gestured with my chin toe. "Ard's Lily," and I had to see for myself. Maya finally looked up from the photo, her eyes swimming with a sorrow so deep it took my breath away. "What do you want, Sarah?" she whispered, using my first name for the first time. I want the truth, I said simply. The truth Daniel was too cowardly to tell his own mother. And then it all came pouring out. The story, kept locked away for 5 years, was released in a torrent of quiet, painful words. She told me everything. She'd found out she was pregnant a month after Daniel had broken up with her, a brutal clinical conversation where he had explained that his future was with Chloe and her family, and that she, Maya, a brilliant scholarship student with a heart of gold, was nothing more than a law school phase. When she told him she was pregnant, he had panicked. He begged her to take care of it, offering to pay for everything, framing it as the only way to not ruin all of our lives. I told him I was having my baby, Maya said, her voice shaking with the memory of her own strength. And that's when he made his real offer. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about him. He offered me money, a disgusting amount of money, to sign a non-disclosure agreement and to disappear. He would send child support payments, wired from an account that couldn't be traced back to him, on one condition: that I never tell a soul he was the father. Especially not you, he said. He said you wouldn't be able to handle the shame, and that Chloe's family would destroy him. The cruelty of it, the sheer, calculated cowardice, was a physical blow. He had used my name, my love for him, as a weapon against her. He had painted me as a fragile, snobbish woman who would be ashamed of her own grandchild. I refused the payoff, Maya continued, her chin lifting with pride. I told him I would take the child support he was legally obligated to provide and nothing more. I didn't want his hush money, but I agreed to the secrecy, not for him, but for Lily. I didn't want my daughter to have a father who was ashamed of her. I thought it was better for her to have no father at all than one who would look at her as a liability. I listened, my coffee untouched, as she filled in the last agonizing details. Daniel visited once, maybe twice a year. Secret, shame-filled visits in parks just like this one, in towns far from his own. He would bring extravagant gifts, as if to buy his daughter's affection and assuage his own guilt. Lily knew him only as Dan, a friend of Mommy's who came to visit sometimes. The photograph had been taken on his last visit, a guilty keepsake of the life he was too weak to claim. When she finished, the silence in the small coffee shop felt vast and sacred. I looked at this incredible woman who had faced an impossible choice and had done so with more grace and integrity than my son would ever possess. She had protected her child not just from poverty, but from the poison of his shame. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. He told you I would be ashamed, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. Maya, look at me. The only shame I feel is for my son. What you have done, the mother you have been to this child, it is the most honorable thing I have ever witnessed. Her composure finally broke, and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. I've been so alone in this, she whispered. Not anymore, I said, my voice fierce with a newfound purpose. He made his choice. He chose to hide his own daughter. Now I am making mine. I am choosing to find her. I am her grandmother, Maya, and I will not be a secret. I want to be in her life. I want to know her, if you'll let me. Maya looked from my face to her daughter, who was now drawing on a napkin with a crayon, oblivious to the monumental shift that was happening around her. For 5 years, Maya had been a fortress, protecting Lily on her own. Now, for the first time, she saw the offer of an ally, not a threat but a reinforcement. I don't know, she said, her voice trembling with fear and a flicker of hope. It's so complicated, Daniel. Daniel made his bed, I said firmly. He does not get a vote in this. This is about her now, and it's about you and me, an alliance of mothers. I squeezed her hand. We can start slow. Another visit to the park, a trip to the zoo. Let her get to know me. Let me get to know her. Please, Maya, don't let my son's weakness punish this child for one more day. She looked at me for a long time, her intelligent eyes searching my face for any hint of deception. And then, for the first time that day, she smiled. A small, watery but genuine smile. Okay, Sarah, she said. Okay, we can try. It was only 2 words, but they were the beginning of a revolution. I left the coffee shop that day with more than just the truth. I left with a fragile alliance and the first, tentative key to my granddaughter's world. The real battle, the one against my son and his cold, perfect wife, was still to come. But now I would not be fighting it alone. Our new reality began with the tentative, fragile steps of a fawn learning to walk. The first few weeks were a dance of careful choreography. We met in public, neutral spaces, a quiet corner of the city zoo, a sun-drenched bench at a botanical garden 2 towns over, the cheerful chaos of a children's library during story time. Maya introduced me to Lily not as her grandmother, but simply as Sarah, a new friend of Mommy's. It was a painful necessity, a shield to protect a little girl's heart from a truth too complex for her to understand. And for Lily, that was enough. She was a child of pure, unfiltered light, accepting my presence with the easy grace that only the very young possess. She showed me the picture she had colored, a wild scribble of purple and orange. She placed her small, warm hand in mine as we walked, a gesture of simple trust that felt more precious than gold. I discovered her in small, stolen moments. I learned that her favorite animal was a giraffe because of their long eyelashes. I learned she hated the texture of peas, but loved the crunch of a crisp apple. I learned she had a deep, throaty laugh that was a direct echo of my late husband's. With every visit, I felt a piece of my own fractured heart knitting itself back together. The joy she brought me was so profound, so elemental it was a physical sensation, a warmth that spread through my chest and pushed out the cold ache of loneliness that had lived there for so long. But this joy was always tinged with a deep and bitter sorrow. Every time I pushed her on a swing, every story I read, every hug she gave me was a secret. I was living a double life. To the world, I was Sarah Ross, a quiet widow. But for a few precious hours a week, I was a grandmother, tending to a secret garden of love that no one else, least of all my own son, could know existed. The bond between Maya and me deepened as well, forged in our shared secret and a mutual unspoken condemnation of Daniel's choices. We were no longer just circumstantial allies. We were becoming family. I saw the exhaustion etched into the fine lines around her eyes, the constant worry of a single mother trying to do it all. So I began to help in small, practical ways. I would bring over a home-cooked lasagna, enough for her to have dinner for 3 nights. I started babysitting, so she could take an extra shift at the legal aid clinic where she worked, or simply have an evening to herself to read a book. I bought Lily a proper pair of winter boots, framing it as an early birthday gift so as not to wound Maya's fierce pride. Maya, who had shouldered this burden alone for 5 years, slowly began to let me in, to share the load. Our alliance was no longer just about Lily. It was about supporting each other. The seasons began to turn. The vibrant greens of summer gave way to the crisp, golden hues of autumn. Lily was turning 5. Her birthday was a milestone, and I felt a desperate, grandmotherly need to mark it, to give her something special, something that would last. Daniel's perfunctory, guilt-ridden gifts were always expensive, impersonal electronics. I wanted to give her a piece of her family's history, a piece of myself. After weeks of searching, I found it in a small, dusty antique shop. A beautiful, handcrafted wooden dollhouse, a perfect replica of the Victorian house I had grown up in. It was absurdly expensive, but I didn't care. I imagined Lily's face when she saw it, and I knew I had to have it for her. And that is where I made my mistake. It was a mistake born not of carelessness, but of joy. My mind was so full of Lily, of the plans for her small, secret birthday party, that I acted on autopilot. At the checkout counter, I handed the shop owner my credit card without a second thought. It was the joint card I still shared with Daniel, an account I'd kept open after Robert's death for emergencies. Daniel had a card for the account as well, and he was set up to receive transaction alerts on his phone. In the 7 years since my husband's death, it had become a relic, a financial appendix I rarely used. But in that moment of pure, unadulterated happiness for my granddaughter, I forgot. I forgot the intricate web of lies we were living in. I forgot that every action had to be filtered through the lens of our secret. The phone call came 2 days later. I was in my kitchen, humming as I baked a batch of Lily's favorite chocolate chip cookies for her party when my phone rang. The screen displayed Daniel's name, and for the first time in months, I felt a jolt not of longing but of pure, cold dread. I answered, my voice steady. "Hello, Daniel." "Don't hello, Daniel, me," he snarled, his voice a low, furious hiss. There was no preamble, no pretense of affection. This was the voice of a cornered animal. "I got a credit card alert, a charge for nearly $2,000 from an antique toy store." "In Northwood? What the hell were you doing in Northwood, Mom?" The blood drained from my face. My carefully constructed secret world had been shattered by a single, foolish credit card transaction. He knew. But as the fear subsided, something else rose in its place. The righteous, roaring fire I had suppressed for so long. The time for secrets and gentle maneuvering was over. "What was I doing, Daniel?" I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "I was buying a birthday present for my granddaughter, for your daughter, Lily, the one you've kept hidden away like a shameful secret while you play the perfect husband in your perfect life." There was a choked, sputtering sound on the other end of the line. You went behind my back," he accused, his voice thick with disbelief and rage. "You found them. I can't believe you did this. You have no idea what you have done." That's when the dam of my restraint finally broke. "I have no idea what I've done," I cried, my voice rising with every word of righteous fury. "I've found a piece of my own heart that you cut out and threw away. I've spent the last 3 months getting to know the most incredible little girl, while her own father pretends she doesn't exist. Don't you dare, for 1 second, talk to me about going behind your back. Your entire life, Daniel, is one giant, despicable lie. You are a coward, and I am done protecting you from the consequences of that cowardice." He was silent, stunned by the ferocity he had never heard from me before. When he spoke again, his anger was laced with a raw, desperate panic. "You have to stop this," he pleaded. "You have to end it now. Chloe can't find out. Her family, they would never understand. They would ruin me. She would leave me. You will destroy everything I've worked for." Everything he had worked for. The delusion was breathtaking. "What you have worked for, Daniel, is a hollow sham built on my money and Maya's silence," I said, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "And I will not be a party to it any longer. The secret is out, at least between you and me. And now you are going to tell your wife. You are going to tell her about your beautiful 4-year-old daughter. You will tell her the truth, or so help me God, I will." "You wouldn't," he whispered, the threat hanging between us. "Try me," I said, feeling a strength I didn't know I possessed. "This isn't a negotiation. This is a reckoning. Your daughter deserves to be acknowledged. She deserves to have a family that isn't ashamed of her. You have 1 week, Daniel. 1 week to tell Chloe the truth. You will choose your child or you will lose your mother. The choice is yours." I ended the call, my hand trembling not with fear, but with the adrenaline of a battle finally declared. The phone lay silent on the counter. The clock was ticking. I had thrown down the gauntlet, forcing my son to finally confront the two halves of his life. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain. The quiet, secret garden was about to become a battlefield. The week after my ultimatum was the longest of my life. The silence from Daniel's end was absolute, a void of terrifying possibilities. I was a general waiting for the battle to begin, not knowing if the first volley would be a white flag of surrender or an all-out declaration of war. I spent the week with Maya and Lily. I didn't tell them the specifics of the deadline I had given my son, but I prepared Maya for the storm I knew was coming. "The secret is out, Maya," I told her over coffee as Lily napped in the other room. "I don't know what will happen next, but whatever it is, we face it together. You are not alone in this anymore." I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw a new strength, the strength that comes from knowing you have an ally in your corner. We were a united front. On the 7th day, my phone lit up. It was not a call from Daniel, but a text message from a number I didn't recognize. The language was cold, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. "This is Chloe. Daniel has informed me of the situation. I expect to see you at my parents' home tomorrow at noon. Come alone." It was not an invitation, it was a summons. The choice of venue was a clear power play. I was not being invited into their home, but into her family's seat of power, a place where I would be an outsider, outnumbered and on enemy turf. They intended for this to be an execution, not a conversation. I slept very little that night, but my fear was secondary to a cold, hard clarity. They had mistaken my love for my son as a weakness they could exploit. They were about to learn that the love a grandmother has for her grandchild is a weapon of unimaginable power. The next day, I drove to the address she had sent. It was in the wealthiest enclave of the city, a neighborhood of sprawling estates hidden behind towering hedges and iron gates. The house was less a home and more a monument to wealth, a cold imp. Osing fortress of glass and stone. A silent housekeeper led me not to a living room, but to a vast, formal library that felt more like a corporate boardroom. And there they were. Chloe sat in a high-backed leather chair, her posture rigid, her face a mask of cold fury. Beside her sat her father, a formidable man with a predatory stillness, and her mother, a woman who radiated an icy disdain. And across from them, looking small and broken in a chair that seemed too big for him, was my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," Chloe said, her voice like chipping ice. The use of my first name was a deliberate move to strip me of my maternal authority. "My husband has told us a rather sordid story about his past indiscretions and about your recent involvement." Her father leaned forward, his hands steepled. "Let us be direct," he said, his voice a low rumble of command. "We see this situation for what it is. A classic case of entrapment, and now it appears blackmail. This woman, this Maya, has been extorting money from our son-in-law for years, and now she has roped you into a scheme to get more." The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth of Maya's noble sacrifice, that I felt no anger, only a profound pity for these people who could only see the world through the transactional lens of their own greed. "There was no blackmail," I said, my voice steady and clear, echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "There was only the legally required child support that Daniel was obligated to pay for the daughter he fathered. And I am not here for money. I am here for my granddaughter." Chloe let out a short, contemptuous laugh. "That child," she said, the word dripping with venom, "is a regrettable consequence of a youthful mistake. She is not, and never will be, a part of this family. We are prepared to offer a final, generous settlement to the mother to ensure this problem disappears permanently. But your interference has complicated things." She looked at me then, her eyes narrowed. "And you are no longer a part of this family either. Your actions have proven you are not on our side." I finally turned my gaze to my son, who was staring at his hands, a man completely hollowed out by his own choices. "I gave you a week, Daniel," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the room. "I told you to choose your family, and I see you have. You chose this. This cold, empty room, this money. You chose wrong." "Enough of this sentimentality," Chloe's father boomed. "You have no power here, Sarah. We will handle this. You will walk away, and you will never contact any of us or the child again. It is what is best for everyone." "I'm afraid you are mistaken," I said, reaching into my briefcase. "You see, I came here today prepared for this. Since you insist on treating this like a business negotiation, let's review the assets." I placed a small, neat folder on the polished table. I slid the first document across to Chloe's father. "This is a copy of the $50,000 check I gave Daniel and Chloe for their wedding. You'll note the memo line from the bank. From the Robert Ross life insurance policy. That was my husband's legacy. The foundation of your daughter's, proper, home was built with the last of my dead husband's money." I slid out a second document. "This is a summarized accounting of the tuition, housing, and living expenses I paid for during Daniel's 7 years of university and law school. A grand total of over $300,000. The brilliant lawyer you thought you were getting as a son-in-law was an investment made on a teacher's salary. My investment." I let the weight of that sink in before I delivered the final blow. I slid the last document across the table. It was a formal petition to the family court. "And this," I said, my voice ringing with absolute authority, "is a petition for grandparents' visitation rights. It has already been filed. You see, I am not asking for your permission to see my granddaughter. I am informing you of my legal right to do so. You can fight me. You can drag your family's pristine name through a very public, very messy court battle, where the world will learn that your perfect son-in-law hid his own child for 5 years to protect his social standing. Or you can step aside. But make no mistake. Either way, I am going to be a part of my granddaughter's life." The room was utterly silent. The threat of a public scandal, of their carefully constructed facade being ripped away, was the one weapon they had no defense against. Chloe's father stared at the petition, his face a mask of thunderous fury. He looked at Daniel with a look of pure disgust. "You were a bad investment," he said, the words a final, brutal verdict. I stood up. "My business here is done," I said. I walked over to my son, who finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a universe of regret. "I love you, Daniel," I whispered. But I am so profoundly disappointed in the man you became. I hope, for your sake, you can find your way back. Then I turned and walked out of that cold, silent mausoleum and back into the sunlight. 1 year later, I am sitting on a park bench, the same one where I first saw her. Lily, now a confident 6-year-old, is flying high on a swing, her dark curls trailing behind her, her laughter echoing in the warm air. Maya sits beside me, her face relaxed and happy. The court battle never happened. Chloe's family, terrified of the scandal, retreated. Chloe filed for divorce a month after that meeting, and Daniel, stripped of his wife, his job and his place in their world, was left with nothing but the consequences of his choices. He now has court-ordered visitation with Lily every other weekend. He is awkward and sad, but he is trying. For the first time, he is trying to be a father. His relationship with me is strained, but we are talking. There is a long road ahead, but there is hope. I am no longer just a grandmother. I am the matriarch of a new kind of family, one built not on money or secrets, but on the fierce, unyielding love of 2 mothers and the beautiful, bright-eyed little girl who is the center of our world. I did not lose a son. I gained a daughter, and I saved my granddaughter. And my heart, which was once so empty, is now, finally, full. If you liked this story, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this. We love hearing from you, so please share your thoughts on Sarah's difficult choice in the comments section below. Do you think Daniel deserved a second chance? Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.